Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 8th Special Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. I want to begin by recognizing that we are on the traditional territory of the Nanaimo First Nation. Our clerk tonight is Ms. Sheila Gurry, to my right. We do not have any councillors attending electronically. Today's Special Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedural Bylaw 2018, number 7272. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding matters considered by the committee tonight, please sign up on the speakers list located on the table by the double doors to my left. This evening's Special Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will include presentations from community members and delegations. Once the committee has heard from all registered presenters and delegations, the presenters will remain seated and form a panel, and members of the public will be invited to pose questions through council to the panel or to any staff in attendance. At that time, I will begin by calling on those who have signed up on the speakers list. As we are starting a little earlier tonight, I intend to conclude this meeting at approximately 8:30 p.m. Before we start the meeting, I would like to take a few moments to remind those who are attending in person about the rules of decorum for all council and committee meetings. A meeting of council is intended to be a place where democracy can freely take place in a respectful and safe manner. The council chambers is a workplace, and there are considerations council and staff must make to ensure that a safe work environment exists in accordance with WorkSafe BC regulations. To support this, and in accordance with the Council's procedure bylaw, disrespectful conduct will not be tolerated, so we ask that there be no cheering, jeering, or other disruptions from the gallery. Furthermore, the use of electronic devices for recording or photographing is prohibited unless otherwise authorized through the media accreditation policy or by the chair. This will ensure that anyone speaking, whether it be a delegation, member of council, or staff, is not interrupted and can make their point freely without distraction, fear of ridicule, or intimidation. In instances where a speaker is being inappropriate or has exceeded their time limit, their microphone will be cut off. Similarly, if there are disruptions by any person in the gallery, they will be asked to stop, and if they do not comply, they may be asked to leave as permitted under Section 133 of the Community Charter. If necessary, council may call a recess in order to reset the environment of the council chambers, and I really hope we don't do any of that tonight. It's our belief that if everyone is respectful of these basic considerations, this meeting and future meetings will be more effective in furthering the business of the City of Nanaimo. Before I turn it over to Ms. Gurry, I'm going to note that the Minister Malcolmson is with us tonight. Minister Malcolmson is the Minister of Poverty Reduction and Social Development. Just want to acknowledge she's here to listen tonight. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Roger Walmsley, who is on our panel, is not connected to Island Health. Dr. Walmsley, if you could just give a wave, thank you. He is here presenting his personal thoughts as an emergency room physician and medical director of Clearview Detox. So, beginning, Ms. Gurry, late items, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, Council. For late items this evening, we have the addition of a PowerPoint presentation from Nanaimo Brain Injury Society titled Dry Supportive Housing is a Missing Part of Nanaimo's Continuum, and that is for agenda item 4A14 from Kik Sitten, and Executive Director, Nanaimo Brain Injury Society. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you very much. Could I have a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended? Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? I see none opposed. Okay, so this, just a bit of background, this is a committee meeting of council, that's why I'm chairing. I'm the acting mayor. Leonard usually sits in this seat. Because this is a committee, it's a little bit more informal between council and members of the public and our panel. One of the ways we've modified tonight's program to really increase engagement is we typically do not allow members of the public to ask questions of those on a panel. But tonight, for question period, and tonight only, our panelists are open to questions, so the questions don't need to come to council, they need to come through me as chair. You will direct your questions to me, but they can be to anyone who's spoken tonight. So that's what's different about tonight's committee meeting. I want to thank staff for being here. This is an unusual committee time for us. Appreciate everyone's time. So we have four presenters and 3 delegations, and I'm just going to kick us off with Caitlin Tolton, Deputy Warden, Programs from Nanaimo Correctional Center. Welcome, and thanks for being with us.
Hi, thank you. So I'm the Deputy Warden of Programs at Nanaimo Correctional Center, as mentioned. I've been with BC Corrections now for just over 12 years, and throughout my time there, I've had the opportunity to work in a variety of roles, each shaping how I approach rehabilitation, programming, and reintegration. A significant part of my current portfolio is I oversee the Guthrie Therapeutic Community, or GTC. A therapeutic community is a highly structured, evidence-based treatment environment designed to support individuals dealing with substance use and associated behaviors. It's not simply a program, it's a living learning environment. Participants are immersed in a pro-social community where they're held accountable by both staff and peers. They engage in daily structured programming. They build skills around emotional regulation, responsibility, and healthy relationships. The model is built around the idea that change happens through community, and that individuals can support each other in making meaningful and sustained shifts in behavior. When I first started in corrections over a decade ago, the population we were working with looked quite different from what we see today. While substance use has always been a factor, we are now seeing a significant increase in complexity, particularly related to mental health challenges, concurrent disorders, and most notably the impacts of the fentanyl crisis. Individuals are entering custody today with more severe addiction patterns, greater physical and psychological dependency, and an increased vulnerability to mental health decline. This has had a direct impact on the level of care, structure, and support required within our center. With the increased complexity, it's become clear that our traditional ways of measuring success within our center no longer fully reflect the realities of the individuals we work with. Success in this environment is not a simple measuring stick, and it cannot be viewed as one size fits all. Each individual we work with has a different history, a different trauma, different levels of readiness for change, and for some, success is going to look different. For some, it might just be completing a program or reducing substance use, or it might be simply engaging with their staff and peers better than they did before. It's critical that we recognize progress is individualized, and with that, accept that reintegration requirements will also require a varying level of ongoing support. Specifically for those currently in the GTC program, they have committed a minimum of 4 months in a structured recovery environment that is, for the most part, abstinence-based. This is a significant achievement for them. However, the reality is that the transition from a structured therapeutic environment back into community is one of the highest risk periods for them to relapse. For individuals coming out of Guthrie, continuity of care is absolutely critical. During their time in the program, they are not just abstaining, but they are learning how to live differently. They build routines, they learn accountability, they learn coping strategies, and stability. If they are discharged into environments where substance use is present, there is little stability or structure, or they return to the same pressures and environments they came from, the risk of relapse is immediate and extremely high for them. Many cases, it's not a lack of motivation that leads to their relapse, it's a lack of appropriate environment and support once they leave our care. Dry supportive housing provides a critical bridge between custody and full reintegration for those who have already been in recovery within a correctional center. It offers a safe, substance-free environment, continued structure and accountability for them, access to community-based supports, and the opportunity to apply the skills developed in Guthrie in a real-world setting. Without that bridge, we're asking individuals to go from a highly structured environment directly back into conditions that often mirror the very circumstances that led to their incarceration in the first place. This gap is where we see them begin to struggle. When individuals are supported with dry housing upon release, we significantly see an increase in their likelihood of maintaining sobriety, reducing recidivism, and achieving more stable reintegration outcomes. We see this happen with our alumni that are in Guthrie, and when we compare when they've gone into dry housing or when they've gone into other treatments or lack of treatments. In closing, the work we are doing at NCC, particularly with Guthrie, is about creating meaningful opportunities for change. And in order for this change to be sustainable, it must extend beyond our center. By recognizing the increasing complexity of the individuals we serve, redefining success, and ensuring appropriate reintegration supports, especially for those in recovery within the center, we can improve outcomes not just for these individuals, but for our community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tolton, for that presentation. I have 2 questions for you. Councillor Armstrong.
Through you, Chair, 2 questions, if I may. The first one is, I was fortunate enough to tour Guthrie when I was policing it and met quite a few of them, and I know that it was very successful while they were in there. And also, congratulations to BC for that program, because it's one of the only ones in Canada, and I understand now that more and more provinces are looking at it because it has such a great success, so that's great. Right now, once they're released, if they're not on a probation or anything, how do they find housing, do you know? Is there anything available other than, I believe, Connect used to help? I'm not sure.
So right now, the group that we have contracted in to do the counseling work works with them in their case management and tries their best to get housing for them. Unfortunately, housing is very limited, and a lot of the residents that complete that program don't want to go to a place that allows substance use. So they end up trying to go on their own in some cases, or go back to the community they came from, and hopefully they can just tough through it. But it doesn't often work out. We see more success with people that are going into a dry facility than when they don't.
Thank you, and I'll be asking this question of Dr. Walmsley as well. When somebody's in recovery, there's a strong chance of relapse, correct? Like, and we want to make sure that those people get to stay. We're not asking for people to be removed if they relapse, because it could take 3 or 4 times, maybe 5, 6, to stay in a thing. But in your opinion, is it simpler to stay or get back on track if you're in a place where the same people are going through the same thing you are, there's not active drug use on site or alcohol on site? Would they have a better chance of success of going back to the road of recovery?
From my experience and for those I've worked with in Guthrie, I would say yes, but that's just my personal experience with the people I've worked with in GTC.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Gesselbra.
Thanks so much for the presentation. I was a counselor actually in the Guthrie program. I think it's been over a decade now. But you know, it was very difficult finding housing for people, any housing coming out of the program, and definitely if it wasn't dry housing, it would make it much more difficult and higher chance of relapse. And my question is, currently in Nanaimo, how many folks are in the Guthrie program right now? Like, what's sort of the max amount that you have there? And then second, currently, how many dry housing units? Because I know there was VTC, Vancouver Island Therapeutic Community on the outside, and then there was about 3 or 4 other housing that were available, like Thunderbird and that. I don't know if they're still around, but what is the current amount of dry housing available for folks coming out of the Guthrie program currently in Nanaimo?
So currently, the maximum amount of residents that we can have in the Guthrie Therapeutic Community is 48. That is our max. And as far as the number of beds or spaces, I know it's gone down over the years. Unfortunately, I don't recall the exact number today. We used to have direct ties to VITC. We don't anymore. And with that specific facility, for example, and in talking to the counselors down there now with many others, we struggle to get them to accept guys coming out of custody. A big reason for that is back when you would have worked there, many of the residents there were sentenced, so they had an exact release date. Now, many of our residents are remanded, so they don't have a definitive date yet. So housing are reluctant to accept them, not knowing when exactly they're going to show up. So that's another hurdle that we're working on right now, because they could get bail tomorrow, they might get bail 2 months from now. So there's not a definitive date that they're leaving, and that is the majority of our residents currently.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair, through you, and thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. One is the Guthrie program. Are there other programs like this in other parts of British Columbia?
Not within a correctional setting.
Okay. And a lot of folks that have addiction challenges that end up in the criminal justice system also have other challenges such as mental health challenges or brain injury. Are there any kind of special programs for people who get out of prison who have multiple challenges?
So with our counseling team, we work to get people into the best student environment for them. Within our center, we have concurrent disorder counselors that can help with a variety of things while they're in there. Upon release, we just kind of do the best we can. There's really no guarantee, unfortunately.
And do parole officers, are they tasked with kind of helping people guide them through a process?
We're provincial, so we don't deal with parole really much at all. Just day parole, which is very rare to get these days.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Gesselbrock?
Thanks. Just another question, just in terms of like policy, when folks are coming up to the release date, in terms of the community that they're returning to. You know, when I was there was a lot of individuals that were quite disconnected from their home community, and many would be released in Nanaimo because, you know, while they were in the program, they made connections with support groups outside of the prison. And they ended up being here. And I know that, you know, it's somewhat concerning to hear that the number of dry housings decreased, but, you know, there's been a considerable amount of resources and energy, you know, dwell in individuals at the Guthrie program to help them, you know, get clean and sober, and then, you know, redevelop, you know, counseling around their traumas and working in community. Being released into the community that the correctional center is in without the resources are, I guess, what is the current policy in terms of release of individuals after their time in the Guthrie program, in terms of the community that they'll be, they'll go back to be reintegrated into?
So generally, we release people to the community they came from, unless we get them waived to stay in Nanaimo, whether that be they're on probation or whatever that might look like. As far as staying in Nanaimo, you are correct. They most like to stay here just based on the community they built within Guthrie. With that, we have a strong outreach system that is from the correctional center that works with whatever our contracting agency is offering it. They stay connected through an alumni program to Guthrie itself and have access to both our outreach worker and our counselors with inside the center, even while they're released, up until the time they choose not to be part of that alumni program as well. So we've established kind of our own internal connection.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tolton. Now I'm going to pass it over to Karen Kuika, who is the president of Newcastle Community Association. She is going to be presenting with Sydney Robertson, who is the chair of the South End Community Association. Over to you both. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go first. My name is Sydney Robertson. I'm the chair of the South End Community Association. I'll go briefly and pass it over to Karen, who will give you the real meat and potatoes of our presentation. I'm going to give you the South End's perspective, which will be kind of more big picture. As you know, our community is hard hit by the issues that we'll be talking about tonight, and as a kind of a microcosm of the rest of our city. In a nutshell, we need these resources. We need the entire array of these resources, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, and I'm speaking to the entire province here. We need these resources. Yeah, sorry, I had all kinds of analogies. I kind of came tonight expecting to have to hit everybody over the head with it, and realized that I'm preaching to the choir. I think we're all on this same page. I'm going to pass it over to Karen and just be ready for questions. Go ahead, Karen.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us at this special GPC. My name is Karen Kuika. I'm speaking on behalf of the Newcastle Community Association, and I'd like to thank Mayor and Council for their leadership, their unanimous support of recovery-oriented housing, and for creating this important forum to discuss an issue that matters deeply to many of us in Nanaimo. I had hoped to present some slides for you this evening. However, after I reviewed hundreds of photographs documenting the many tragic events that have occurred in and around my neighborhood, I'm sure Sydney can relate, over the past 7.5 years, I found myself really paralyzed, re-traumatized, and unable to finish that task. So I've spared you the details of that, but perhaps that in itself says something important. Although we're speaking in council chambers tonight, we hope that our message reaches the province. The redevelopment of 250 Terminal Avenue is an opportunity to update a plan that was developed more than 7 years ago and doesn't necessarily reflect what we have learned about housing, wellness, recovery, and the communities that support supportive housing. The province has already shown that it can adapt housing models to meet emerging needs, and the creation of complex care housing recognized that people with high acuity needs require different environments and supports. Today, we're asking the province to recognize another well-established need, that recovery-oriented dry supportive housing be part of the housing continuum. With patience and compassion, we've lived our way to the answer. Communities need housing developments that sustain wellness, safety, and successful community integration. 52 low-barrier supportive housing units proposed at 250 Terminal will be sharing a driveway, parking, garbage facilities, and other amenities with the proposed 30 affordable units intended for seniors and family. It's simply the wrong housing mix for 250 Terminal. For years, Newcastle Community Association has advocated for recovery-oriented dry housing or lower numbers because it would better support the wellness, safety, and long-term success of all residents. This is particularly important in Nanaimo, where approximately 400 seniors remain on the BC Housing waitlist. In the Newcastle neighborhood, 41% of households include a resident 65 years and older. These are statistics directly from the city of Nanaimo. The redevelopment of 250 Terminal is a critical opportunity to pivot and get this right. The housing decisions made now will have decades-long impact. Tonight, that position is supported by healthcare professionals, recovery advocates, community organizations, BC's own Save Our Streets Coalition, both Nanaimo MLAs, our Member of Parliament, and unanimously, of course, repeatedly by Nanaimo City Council. That level of political and community alignment, it's exceptional. It's uncommon. It demonstrates the strength of a united community working toward a positive change. It reflects a shared belief that recovery matters, wellness matters, and that housing policy should support both. Our ask is straightforward. To the province, please recognize recovery-oriented, dry supportive housing as part of the continuum of housing and reimagine, rethink the 250 Terminal Avenue project accordingly. This site should become a model for recovery, wellness, and successful community integration. To Council, please continue to advocate for this shared outcome and use every available tool, including future agreements and housing partnerships, to ensure that recovery-oriented housing remains a priority at this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kawika. Any questions from council?
Sure.
Councillor Manley, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, both of you. A question to you, Ms. Kawika. You live very close to 250 Terminal. Did you ever witness drug dealers coming by and hanging around the outside of that facility?
Every day.
Okay, so people are there in a predatory mode. They know where to find folks who are in
Yeah, this morning, in fact, there was a van that has been frequenting the area, and a man jumped out of the van with an axe and chased down someone that had a drug debt with the axe.
Yeah, not the kind of thing you want to see from your home. A quick question to you, Ms. Robertson. I know that you've advocated many times. I'm hoping that the housing minister is watching this, but you've advocated many times for a dispersed model for supportive housing and services, because your neighborhood is encumbered by a plethora of them. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that?
I am always happy to tell you more about that. You know, that's my constant theme, Councillor. Thank you. Yes, our theme for years has been that supportive housing needs to be distributed throughout the entire city, and our mantra to every neighborhood in the city is that every neighborhood is capable of absorbing some supportive housing and should be absorbing some supportive housing. It should be part of every neighborhood. It should be, part of the Woodgrove Plan. It should be part of every neighborhood's fabric. Our neighborhood was perfectly capable of absorbing quite a bit of supportive housing. We've hit our limit and gone beyond it. That's the problem. No neighborhood is capable of absorbing too much. And Karen actually had the perfect analogy several years ago about a path in a park, a lovely little woodland park that has a nice little wooded path that a number of people can walk it every day and enjoy the path, and then more people and more people and more people walk the path, and it gets a little muddier and it gets a little muddier and it's not enjoyable, and more people and more people and more people, and the path can't take it. And that's the problem. So it's not that fewer people can walk the path, it's you need more paths. If you have more paths, then any number of people can walk them. So yes, we need more and more and more supportive housing. We need it distributed throughout the entire community, and we need an array of supportive housing. It's not one size fits all. We need recovery housing. We need all kinds of models for it. Nobody wants to live in the same kind of community. Nobody wants to live in the same part of the city. So does that answer your question, if I covered it?
Just as a follow-up, organizations like Nanaimo Association for Community Living have group homes, which are like regular homes distributed through the community. Some of these larger supportive housing units have up to 50 people in them, and I'm just wondering whether you think a smaller model may be more expensive, but a smaller model would be easier to handle for neighborhoods.
Absolutely. BC Housing actually, a number of years ago, had a study that said, I think it was 34 units was kind of an optimal number, and we actually agreed and thought 34 seemed like a really good number. It seemed to be, they said at the time that it was the optimal number for efficiency for public money, but also for a decent house size for the people living there and for integration into a neighborhood. And that was at the time that the housing on Uplands was built. And I believe it came in just under that size. And I think it's an excellent example of a building that integrated well into the neighborhood, under 34 units. I think it's, and I think that kind of group home, those kind of models as well are well worth looking at. I think there are a lot of models that are well worth looking at.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
2 questions through you, if I may. The first one will go to Ms. Kuika. You also are near the Canadian Mental Health Association living building where there's 28 residents. Do you have many issues there, or are you aware of any issues there?
We did experience an issue
Sorry.
with
Ms. Kuika. Thank you.
We did experience an issue with a resident that had relapsed, but we through our Block Watch program in Newcastle and through our relationship with the manager there, we were able to assist that problem resident to get the help they need and to move out of the building. That model there also has market housing in it, so it functions reasonably well.
And do you find that like quite often at the supportive housing units, we find the followers there, it's not always the residents that are causing the problems, it's people that may be coming in to visit or dealers, etc. A lot of the residents don't want them there, but that's just what happens. Do you find the same at the mental health building, that there's a lot of hang-arounders?
I haven't seen the same there myself, no.
Right. And my second question to either one of them is, after the South End Community Association spoke to us about the hub, I had a young boy come up to me, I think he was like 11 or 12, and he asked me, and his question was, why is an addict's life more important than mine? He said, I've been threatened, I'm scared to sleep in my bedroom, and I'm sure you know who I'm referring to. And to the point where the parents were looking at moving because their children are scared. Do you know of other examples of that, or is that an isolated case? Either one of you? Or even seniors, I know some seniors feel that way too.
So I'm not totally clear of the question. Other
Do you know,
examples?
do you know of other examples where children are scared to be in their own homes because of the stuff that comes around, because of the large numbers of people?
Oh, yes, yes, and other families that have moved and are moving, absolutely, yes. I'm happy to say that since the hub is closed, that I personally know of at least one family that is not moving, so thank you. It's, you know, it's crushing to me personally and to us as a community to lose young families from the neighborhood. But yes, it's been a, you know, historically a hard thing for the South End to have families move out. So yes, absolutely. It's, you know, we heard it from that family, and we've heard it from others as well. You know, parents with, you know, values that align with wanting to be part of the solution, wanting to well, I'll give an example from that family. They live not far from the Sobering and Assessment Center, and before the hub opened, they made it part of their parenting to talk with their child about what they would see, that they would, if they saw someone on the sidewalk, they weren't sure if someone's okay, they would talk about, well, we're just gonna stop, we may be a few minutes late to school, it's the way it goes, we have to make sure somebody's okay. This is what we do, it's part of being in a community. They made it part of being a caring person in a healthy community. This is what we do, right? When our community became overwhelmed with the hub, it was the parents found their compassion fatigue overwhelmed them. They weren't responding anymore. The child was saying, "Mommy, why aren't we stopping?" Right? And the mother had to say, "Oh my God, of course we're stopping." It's so hard. It's so hard to parent a child with these kinds of challenges. It's so hard to have these conversations. It's so hard to deal with your own trauma as an adult, your own fears as a parent, and your child's trauma and your child's feelings and your worries about your child on top of all of that as well. So yes, absolutely, it's something that many parents in our neighborhoods worry about. And you know, we have some excellent operators of supportive housing in our neighborhoods, absolutely, some excellent operators. There can still be spillover effects in the alleys and the areas around, and everyone is doing everything they can. There is so much high praise for the community safety officers in our neighborhood. It's quite something to hear. Everyone is doing excellent work, and yet it's hard. It's hard to live with.
Anything from you, Ms. Kawika?
Yeah, I can think of one parent that has 2 children, and they've been accosted a couple of times. And one really troubling incident, there was a person using substances and probably in some form of psychosis. And they took one of the torches to the parent and threatened to kill the children. And so the parent did the right thing, moved the children out of the way, called the police. The police came, and the person was arrested roadside. And then in front of the children, because of the circumstances of this individual, they were given a roadside promise to appear. And they were left to go back out in the community with their substances and with their torch. And it was a really troubling message for this parent, and one of the children that was younger was really struggled to feel safe because of the confusion of the the message they witnessed.
Thank you. I'll have more to say at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. For those who have joined us since 6:30 meeting start, there's a question period sign-up sheet just to my left here. If you want to ask questions of any council members, any staff, any of the panelists tonight, you're more than welcome to do that. I also want to acknowledge that we have Member of Parliament Tamara Cronus on the line and listening. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the work that this council has done bringing this to the table, and I want to particularly acknowledge Councillor Armstrong. I should have done this at the beginning of the meeting, but Councillor Armstrong has really been driving this. And why we are here tonight is in the summer of last year, the mayor wrote on behalf of all of us a request to have the Minister of Housing consider 250 Terminal for dry supportive housing beds. There was some dialogue and exchange with the minister, and in February of this year, we received correspondence that says, I encourage the City of Nanaimo to share any relevant data which may support the request for the designation of 250 Terminal Avenue as dry or supportive housing. So that's a big part of why we're here tonight, and I imagine I'm going to leave this with the mayor, but I suspect that minutes of this meeting and copies of all the presentations will be bundled for the minister to help make our case. So, Dr. Walmsley, I'm going to read a very tiny bio of you, so you don't have to take up your time. Dr. Walmsley is my former boss. So he's a long-serving emergency room physician here in Nanaimo, now primarily an addiction medicine specialist who works with homeless and substance-using individuals in varying capacities. Together with very dedicated and compassionate outreach teams, he works on the street providing primary care outreach and substance use support outreach, as well as physician support for complex care housing patients. As medical director of Clearview Detox Center, he works with clients who are seeking abstinence but end up back on the streets or in wet housing where abstinence is a significant challenge. Dr. Walmsley, over to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this forum. Before I begin, I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge everyone in the room who works with the homeless and for those who use substances to make their lives better when they're often stigmatized. So thank you all, including the counselors. We appreciate your work. In the next few minutes, I would like to share some personal reflections and some evidence-based information that pertains to Newcastle's Sober Housing Initiative. I'm not necessarily an expert in the field, but together with my outreach teams, I work with and learn from many of our homeless individuals at various stages of addiction and recovery. Most importantly, I think that we need to ensure that this is a community-wide initiative from the onset. My hope that if it is approved, the planning involves several of the community not-for-profits, self-help groups, drug user groups, alongside neighborhood associations, this council, and local healthcare agencies. We're all in this canoe together and need to be paddling in the same direction with equity and cultural awareness top of mind. Minister Boyle's correspondence makes a particular point of stating that the proposed beds are not treatment beds. While the difference between abstinence-based and treatment-based housing may sound straightforward, I think that it's a bit artificial. For abstinence-based housing to be sustainable, there are various treatment-based supports that are necessary to help select and sustain clients in non-treatment recovery housing. Housing is, after all, a human right, and having it conditional on good behavior is problematic. If remaining abstinent puts residents under the threat of eviction with loss of supports, sustainability will suffer. Ministry of Housing and Ministry of Health initiatives are interdependent and need to be closely intertwined for this housing opportunity to be sustainable. Siloed initiatives rarely work well, and this initiative needs to outlast a 4-year political cycle. So how does the Newcastle Recovery Housing proposal fit with some of the available evidence? abstinence-based housing is most helpful for 3 broad categories of homeless individuals. A, individuals in early recovery who are transitioning from inpatient or outpatient residential treatment. B, those with alcohol use disorders. And C, those with adequate baseline recovery capital. Recovery capital is a key concept that deserves a separate discussion on another occasion. More specifically, 1, abstinence-based housing has shown positive results for many alcohol use disorder clients, resulting in prolonged abstinence, greater employment, and quality of life outcomes. Older age and lower anxiety also predict longer stays in this group. 2, abstinence-based housing has been shown to improve mental health in individuals with concurrent psychiatric disorders, particularly when social and mental health supports are readily available. 3, for individuals diverted from or released from incarceration, outcomes have been inconsistent. Less experienced houses were associated with lower probability of 1-year abstinence, specifically for women. Early reduced substance use was the only benefit compared to other residential options. And 4, there is currently insufficient evidence on outcomes for individuals who use opioids, even for those on opiate agonist therapy, since many sober houses do not accept clients on Suboxone or methadone. More studies are needed. What about more general predictors of success? The evidence is quite clear that recovery-oriented houses that are a part of a larger organization have significantly increased odds of total abstinence. Many of you may be aware of the Stories Complex in Richmond, a 129 rental unit facility that partners with several not-for-profits, self-help groups, the local health authority, and local, provincial, national governments. It incorporates both addiction and mental health supports, and the early reports are impressive with positive neighborhood support. The Newcastle project is much more limited in scope, but structure, accountability, and peer supports have proven to be critical for sustainability in all forms of supportive housing. As an aside, a few years ago, I provided addictions advice and support for a BCIT affiliated proposal for an integrated recovery-based addiction treatment housing and employment-focused facility, which I submitted to the Island Health and Nanaimo's SPO. It was well received in concept, but did not garner sufficient support to move forward. It was perhaps a bit ahead of its time for our community. In my view, the Newcastle proposal provides a bubble of hope with a few qualifications. I think it needs to start small with a few well-chosen clients and build over time. I am curious about the screening process for applicants and the provisions for relapse. Relapse needs to be recognized as an integral part of recovery. And most important is the degree of collaboration and integration with the larger community of citizen groups, peer supports, and healthcare agencies. So even though this is not a treatment-based proposal, it is certainly part of the continuum of care. There is need for sober supportive housing in this community. It is perhaps the next right thing, to quote Carl Jung. We absolutely need supportive housing for a select group of homeless individuals who are at an advanced stage of recovery from abstinence. In closing, and in the words of our CMA president, equity has to be built into how we innovate. And I am reminded of the South African concept of Ubuntu, translated to mean, I am because we are. Our lives are not separated, but braided. We are who we are through one another. Thank you for allowing me to bring a voice to those who don't have one, and for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Walmsley. I've got questions for you. Councillor Manley?
Thank you, Chair, through you. When people have been through treatment or detox and then are exposed to drug use again, their tolerance is lowered. I imagine that's the case, and or I understand that's the case. Can you tell me a little bit about what happens, the incidence of death that happens with people who relapse after being in treatment that end up in a situation where they're using again?
How detailed of a neurologic response would you like on that?
Go as deep as you like.
I'll keep it simple. I think it's not that difficult to understand that we all have opiate receptors in our brain. Over time, when people use opioids, they need more and more opioids to satisfy those receptors. And as you probably have seen on the street, and as we see in addiction medicine, people's capacity for opioids can grow tremendously. We can give them more and more and more. They've recruited a tremendous amount of opioid receptors in their brain. When they go through withdrawal management, then the whole idea of that is to gradually reduce the opioid receptors that are available to them. So by the time they leave some sort of treatment or detox facility, they're susceptible, unless they, let me put a caveat to that, unless they've transitioned to a form of opiate agonist therapy that supplements or replaces the street opioids, that those opioid receptors are now opioid naive. In fact, when we first started treating opioid patients at Clearview, we said we had many applicants who came in and their goal was to be off all drugs when they left. That was a killer. What we did was we took away all their tolerance, their opioid receptor tolerance, and their ability to substitute with anything else, and they went back to the street, used the same amount of opioids they were using before, they died. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I've been doing a lot of research on this probably for about 15, 20 years, because when I was policing, myself and Dave LeBerge, we had to sell the supportive housing units to communities under the Liberals, and there was 32 was the maximum allowed at the time, which was interesting. But anyhow, one of the big things, this is the latest research I found, and it comes out of Frontiers, which did a big study on recovery housing, and it was done out of the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard University and Boston Center for Addictions and Mass General. And I'm just going to read right here. Recovering housing has markedly grown in availability and utilization over the past decade and is now the most widely available form, and it's called SUD, substance use disorder, recovery support infrastructure with 10,000 houses across the United States. So they've been doing lots of reviews. And one of the models that they talked about is a place in Boston called Oxford. And it's actually, there's a manager on site, but a lot of it's run by the people staying there, so they have decision-making. And the thing that they talk about, and it was touched upon by Deputy Warden Tolton, structure, right? Because they come from a structure, and then when you're thrown out, and I guess at this point I'm actually probably referring, well, actually probably a lot of them, it allows them to be part of the structure, and they're with like-minded people that want to stay healthy. The concern I have with some of the models I see across Canada, and I think you touched on it, is that people are going to relapse. You shouldn't be kicked out for being relapsed. I think that's a really important point, that whatever model we look at, like, you can't, like, I don't know many alcoholics, and I don't know many drug users that get clean on the first try. I'm sure there's some, but I'm sure they're probably in the minority. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but that's been my experience. So would you say that it's very important that if we are successful in our application to have this model, that it's important that whoever the operator understands the fact that relapse is part of recovery?
Yes, and I tried to make that point in my presentation. It is absolutely a part of recovery, and when I'm talking with a client, a patient, I think it reduces the fear for them as well. When I say to them, you know, they may be doing well at the moment, and many of them have done well for a period of time, some with very accomplished careers, but then they have a minor relapse, some upset in their life, some minor trauma, some grieving situation, and they relapse. And then they're back in my facility, treatment facility or detox. And I try and reassure them, and I think it really helps them to understand that relapse is part of recovery.
And do you think if somebody does relapse, if they're relapsing in a dry supportive housing, it's much better for them to go back to an environment like that where there's people that are trying to stay healthy and on the road to recovery versus going to a place where there's active drug use?
I think it's individual for each person. It depends on why they relapsed, what supports they may need. And that's why I keep mentioning that I think that if we have a compendium of supports for even those in these supposed sober houses, I think we need to have a variety of supports available to help them get through whatever it was that caused them to relapse, and to put them, to put them back in a sober housing so that they don't feel that, as I mentioned, that threat of eviction is hanging over them all the time.
Yeah, because one of the concerns I do have, and I believe it was Councillor Manley that shared it when he was running the shelters, he would see people go off for detox, come back, and then start using again because they're back in the same environment that they, started using in. And like you had stated, they start using again and they're dead because their tolerance is gone. And again, I'm a strong believer of out therapy. I think it's got its place as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you, if I may. Dr. Walmsley, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. I appreciate your expertise. I've got a question for you, and I'd like your opinion. We, I think, often hear the term, and I believe the government supports this philosophy of housing first. I have always personally been of the opinion that treatment should come first. And once treatment has been at least started, then housing follows with a better chance of success. Is that something you would disagree with? I ask this, and I don't mean to put you on the spot with a silly question, but you indicated how intertwined housing and treatment are in your comments, so I'm curious.
I think to answer the question, it's fair to say that a lot of people end up using drugs because they don't have housing. And a lot of people that end up on the street, they end up using street drugs to stay alive. There's many instances of people that use stimulants to stay up overnight in the winter so they don't die of cold, so that they don't lose all their belongings,
right,
so that they have some sort of security to make it to the morning. I think it's a really difficult question to say what comes first, the cart before the horse. I do think that housing is very important, and I think if a lot of the people I see on the street, particularly now some of the elderly that I'm seeing in my primary care outreach work on the street that come to us in the van needing supports, if they had a house, they wouldn't be seeing us. They would be going to probably some more formal urgent care center. They maybe wouldn't be drinking as much alcohol. They wouldn't be perhaps picking up as much cannabis. They wouldn't be in a variety of critical or less critical health circumstances. So it's certainly intertwined. I'm not going to give a very straight answer for you. I certainly think that housing is super important and the two go hand in hand. But in a lot of cases, if many of the people I help that we see, if they had a house, they wouldn't be where they were.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And as you say, they are intertwined. And it's not a case of one comes totally before the other or vice versa. But I think they're both extremely important. Would it be fair, though, to say that after treatment or during treatment, that treatment is better reinforced in a situation where there is abstinence-based surroundings?
I think that if I can just draw an example of one of the challenges we faced, and it's not all, it is changing, but many of our Indigenous cultural treatment centers do not allow any form of opiate agonist therapy or any form of safe supply for people to be treated in their facility. The outcomes are less successful than treatment centers that allow you to be on some form of opiate agonist therapy per se, maybe on methadone, Suboxone, et cetera, or even getting a limited supply of other harm reduction medications. So it's not a straightforward answer, but I think that if it's a well-organized treatment program, and particularly for people on opioids, if they're transitioned first to a safe level of opiate agonist therapy versus just abstinence, they'll do better in the long run.
Right. So in very simple terms, sorry, Chair, if I
Please,
may,
by
one
all
more
means.
comment or question. If a person has been receiving treatment, there's a better chance or a less likely chance of relapse if they are into a dry facility as opposed to a wet one.
I would actually not agree with that.
Oh.
I think that the transition they need is gradual. If they're a heavy opioid user, my suggestion is that they go to a treatment center that allows them to transition to a safe supply of opiate agonist therapy and gradually transition down. Maybe 6 months down the road, they will stop that opiate agonist therapy and they'll be completely dry. But I think they have a better outcome if they gradually transition off whatever street supply they're on.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments.
Thank you. Councilor Perino.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And Dr. Walmsley, I've been watching your work for years, and I'm so pleased that you're still using the original van that we got years ago. So thank you for what you do. I just want to be clear that I understand this. If a person is very heavily addicted to drugs, and then go on to, and I had not been familiar with the term opioid agonist therapy, is that correct?
Correct.
So moving them would not be in your recommendation to a dry facility, even though they're at that stage of their rehabilitation, is that correct?
If the dry supportive housing allows opiate agonist therapy, if that's part of what they consider dry, then absolutely.
Okay, so that there could be housing with that ability to be able to help people, because I am familiar with people who go back out and immediately go back to the same level of drugs, and then, of course, they're gone. And so it sounds like a huge move forward that we are actually able to see people survive through that transition period. But so what we possibly need to be focusing somewhat on is dry housing where they could use these drugs as they're rehabbing to being completely dry. Is that right?
As I mentioned, the evidence is not great with this group yet because we don't have a lot of sober houses that accept people on opiate agonist therapy.
Okay.
But, and I will say again that for people who are alcoholics, where they're transitioning off of alcohol, that is the group that does the best with sober housing. That's the evidence. And we have a tremendous number of people who have significant alcohol use disorder in society. We're always mostly talking about opioids in the community because it's so evident. The much larger, in fact, roughly 30 to 60%, depending on what part of the country you're talking about, families are directly affected by alcohol.
Okay, but that supportive housing that you're talking about in that case, is that dry? Am I seeing?
For alcoholics?
For alcoholism, yes. Okay, and then if just one more question, if I may, Chair. How long does it generally take a person once they go into supportive housing? How long do they generally need to be there before they can transition to what most of us would be considered as your average kind of housing arrangement, where they're on their own without support?
Some people will never transition off that.
Okay, so we need to be prepared for supportive housing that could be for the rest of their lives.
Correct.
So we need to have enough to carry us through.
Yeah, I think, I will say this, and I gave the example of the Stories project in Richmond.
Yes.
Where places where there is employment training and people get into a very different lifestyle, they gain a purpose once again, and they can transition off medications completely. I think it is reasonable that they can go back to straight market housing and live. There are many examples of people like that have gone on to live very fruitful and what we call normal lives without substances.
Yeah, it's bringing the joy back of life that would be just so important. So thank you again for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Walmsley, I knew you would be a hit. I've got quite a speakers list, and I just want to remind my colleagues that we really want to hear from community and leave time for that. So we're an hour out from calling this meeting, and we have 4 presentations ahead of us. So quick if we can. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Great, thank you, Chair. I appreciate the nuanced responses. And just in terms of gaps, I think, you know, I think there's a huge need for a whole spectrum of housing and supports out there. And I think strategically, just with the current resource constraints, trying to find continuums of care that we know that can get people out of addiction and homelessness through into well-being. And so I'm really interested where current bottlenecks are in our continuums of care. And at the start of your presentation, you mentioned that you know, when somebody goes through Clearview Detox, and then there's trying to find appropriate housing for the individual if they're struggling with housing, that there is a current gap for individuals. You named 3 individuals in early recovery transitioning from therapy to housing. There's that first bullet point, and then there was one for alcoholics, recovering from alcoholism, alcohol addiction, and then individuals with a certain degree of recovery capital that could go into a more, you know, and maybe it's an oversimplified term calling it dry housing, but in your opinion, is there a current gap in the housing, health, services for that specific groups of people where, because it's missing in Nanaimo, we are seeing people return to addiction or homelessness because there's just a gap for that specific band in the continuum?
And the specific band you're talking about is?
For those three cases, like, are we missing that type of housing in Nanaimo, and it's causing people reverting back into addiction?
I'm not sure I totally get what the question is, other than to say that yes, there are certainly a lot of gaps in the housing, in the available housing, and even market housing for individuals that are transitioning, that may not need as many supports as they have, or for our long-term care clients that are sitting in homes that end up on the street, or waiting for a long-term care home that end up on the street.
My question is really just prioritization. Like, if the next building that we need to build in terms of reducing the amount of individuals that are in addiction and homelessness, what would it be? And I'm asking, like, is it this particular type of dry housing? Will that kind of address a current bottleneck that we're experiencing within the community?
I think it would help to address the bottleneck. Yes, I think we're there. I think that we do have some wet housing, and we have some houses that are sort of in between, but we certainly don't have any housing that is strictly sober housing for individuals that are well advanced in their recovery care, other than market housing if they can afford it, but we don't have any supported sober housing that is available.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Manley?
Chair, just a quick question about opioid agonist therapy, methadone, Suboxone. I knew somebody who was on methadone for years. I had no idea that they were on methadone, but they have to go to a clinic, do they not, to get, they have to go to a clinic to get methadone or Suboxone on a regular basis. Is that not where they get the medicine, that they get the opioid agonist?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
they
yes.
wouldn't be using, if they were in a supportive dry housing unit, they wouldn't actually be using within that facility. They would still be going to a clinic on a daily basis.
No, so I understood I took the question the wrong way. They can be in dry supportive housing and receive opiate agonist therapy either on a weekly basis if they're stable.
Yeah.
And many methadone patients receive a week's supply of methadone when they're in a reliable setting, and they just allocate it out every day. And with opiate agonist therapy, which is primarily, one of the main ones is Suboxone, it's very safe to give them a week or a couple of weeks' supply ahead of time, and they just take it as they need it.
Just a quick question. How many clinics or pharmacies do we have that provide that agonist therapy?
A good half dozen. There's been new ones pop up in the last couple of months.
In different parts of town? Or?
I'm sorry?
In different parts of town?
In different parts of town, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
So what I hear from you, the important part is we are successful in getting this. Screening process is critical. Thank you.
Mayor Krog.
In the interest of time, I'll skip my question, talk to Dr. Walmsley later. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, moving along. Next, we have Kix Kitan, the Executive Director of the Nanaimo Brain Injury Society. Welcome, Kix, and thank you. I'll turn it right over to you.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this topic. My name is Kix. I'm the Executive Director of the Nanaimo Brain Injury Society. And my little clicker should be working. There we go. June is Brain Injury Awareness Month, so it's a very important time to talk about what brain injury means in real life. So acquired brain injury refers to an illness or injury that happens to the brain after birth. Examples are stroke, concussion, injury due to a motor vehicle accident, falls, assaults, overdose, intimate partner violence. Brain injury is often invisible. It can affect memory, fatigue, emotional regulation, physical ability, the ability to navigate complex systems, everything that all the activities that your brain governs. An estimated 4% of Canadians live with brain injury, and in Greater Nanaimo, that means around 5,000 people. So we have provincial research on brain injury, supported, thankfully, through the province, and Minister Malcolmson was a part of that, so a 3-year research project. And the research is clear that housing is a part of brain injury care. The BC Consensus on Brain Injury involved brain injury survivors, families, clinicians, service providers, and communities around the province. And year 3, the research focused on housing. And participants in the research identified safe, secure housing as foundational to brain injury recovery. The research calls for a continuum of housing, choice that includes choices for folks with individualized supports. And I want to note that stat down there, where it says 50% of people living in homelessness have a brain injury. And the majority of those folks had the brain injury prior to becoming homeless. So what happened? We're talking about all this supportive housing and substance use and all these things. We need to think about the slide, the scale, the sequence of events when someone experiences a brain injury and they are not able to maintain employment, housing, relationships. They are higher risk of substance use, mental health, suicide. So I'm asking to back up this conversation just a little bit and think about brain injury. So the provincial recommendations point to specific design. The consensus tells us what housing should look like for brain injury survivors. It includes integrated supports, trauma-informed care, specialized brain injury responses, because we've heard from folks that a lifelong health condition that is invisible is often misunderstood, and that the function of the brain injury that can affect impulsivity and emotional regulation can become misunderstood as behavior or non-compliance issues, if not recognized as part of the symptoms of brain injury. We also need people with brain injury to help shape the supports that are built for them and where they're going to live. So we have some local data. Nanaimo Brain Injury Society conducted our own housing survey that shows the provincial findings are being lived right here in our community. In the fall of 2025, we sent a housing survey to approximately 300 people who had accessed our services in the past year. And this wasn't just housing support services. It was the gamut of services in our organization, and we received 113 responses. It showed that 45% of respondents said that they were housing stable, and 45% were housing precarious. People were either stable enough to absorb a shock, like losing their income for 30 days, or one disruption away from losing their housing. We also heard clearly that health and housing are deeply connected. 62% of respondents identified that a health condition or disability affects their ability to maintain stable housing. What we found with our clients is that housing vulnerability appears to be concentrated amongst working age adults living with a disability on limited income and limited support networks. These are often people whose needs do not fit neatly within the current housing models. So why the dry option, and I struggle with the wet-dry dichotomy, because one model, as we've heard from the other speakers, and I really appreciate everyone's perspective and expertise, one model cannot meet every need. For people who are working to reduce or stop substance use, living around active use can make recovery harder. For people with brain injury, housing often needs to support routine, calm, predictability, planning, fatigue management, and emotional regulation. For people who are vulnerable because of cognitive challenges and disabilities, the housing environment also matters for safety. It can help reduce exposures to triggers, conflict, exploitation, and trauma. And the goal is not simply placement. The goal is long-term tenancy with health, dignity, and community connections. So we've got some local examples. We see this gap through both what is coming and what has been lost. We're very excited at the Brain Injury Society to see Connect Parksville scheduled to open in fall 2026. It will provide specialized rehab and support for people living with brain injury and stroke, primarily serving Central and North Vancouver Island. This is an incredibly important resource for us, and the average stay in this type of program is between 18 to 24 months. So the question is, where do people go next if they are ready for more independence but still need brain injury-informed supportive housing? And we've also seen what happens when supportive housing for brain injury survivors is lost. Many of you will have known Bill's Place, which was supported dry housing for brain injury survivors in Nanaimo that operated for almost 30 years. And when it closed in 2021, 22 brain injury survivors were displaced from residential and outreach support. Former residents struggled to find appropriate housing. Some returned to more chaotic substance use. Some moved from resource to resource. And one younger man who ended up in long-term care, which was not appropriate for his age or needs, unfortunately passed there 3 years later at the age of 48. We can and must do better for brain injury survivors and their families. So in closing, the need has been identified provincially and it is being lived locally. Brain injury is common, it's often invisible, and it affects how people function day to day. Nanaimo Brain Injury Society's local data and client experience shows a missing option: brain injury-informed supportive housing. This is not about choosing one model over the other. Like my colleagues here, we're not arguing against wet housing, but it's about building the right continuum so people not only survive their brain injury, but thrive afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quiton. For questions, Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much. You had, Ms. Quiton, I really appreciate the work you and the society do, and that's obvious, I think, and the people in this room who know of the work you do. Question around those who hit the streets, so to speak, homeless. I believe it was a national study done by the Canadian Brain Injury Society some years ago. What were the statistics from that about the number of people who lose their housing and have a brain injury already and then end up homeless and then fall victim to the predatory people that Councillor Manley has suggested?
I'm not familiar with the stats off the top of my head from that research, but we do see that, you know, the vulnerability increases for folks once you have that brain injury, and then that slide into greater vulnerability But sorry, I don't know the stats off the top of my head.
I'm not far off, though. I suggest, based on your work, that a high percentage of individuals who end up homeless have an acquired brain injury already.
Yes, yeah, oh, sorry, yeah.
That's what I'm...
Yeah, so that's the stat that I quoted, that over 50% of the unhoused population is living with a brain injury, and the majority of those folks experienced the brain injury prior to becoming homeless. And then being unhoused also puts people at risk of further brain injury. Yeah, correct. Sorry if I didn't.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't very clear. Forgive me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you for your work. There's a spectrum of people experiencing brain injury, and I just know from operating a shelter, we would see people with different disabilities, seniors, low-wage workers, even a VIU student show up at the door at one point. And for a sober or dry or sober-oriented housing, could you see like the supports that other people need being mixed in with folks with brain injury, like having sort of a mixed housing situation so that there's different people in the building with different types of needs? Would that be something that would be feasible? Or do you think that it needs to be very focused on brain injury in particular?
Yeah, I see it as mixed, absolutely, because when we see our clients, the support that they are needing are not necessarily around their substance use. What we're talking about is support around their cognitive function, around planning and decision making and memory and managing fatigue and all those pieces that then would help them maintain their housing. And I would say, and probably Dr. Walmsley could comment as well, that those are universal needs. Like sometimes it's hard to untangle, you know, what when someone is in need of support, it's not necessarily that they always need the support around to manage the substance use. They need supportive housing because of all these other things that are going on. And to me, with brain injury, those are symptoms of the brain injury. They need support around that, not necessarily around their substance use management. So yes, the short answer is yes.
Yeah, okay. No, I have seen people show up at the shelter, in particular a 75-year-old woman in cognitive decline who lost her housing because she wasn't paying her rent. And she didn't have the functionality to be able to follow through on those things that were expected of her. So supportive housing is needed for a wide variety of people, and I think mixing in people who are vulnerable in other ways with people who are in active addiction is not always the best thing to be doing. Well, clearly not. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. So same as when I asked Dr. Walmsley, so screening process then would probably be very important for where these people go. Like, we're not advocating to get rid of wet housing because we do need that. We all understand that. But we're just looking for one which dries so that could maybe support others, because I believe when I talked to you at one point, there are some people that have a brain injury that do not do well going into wet housing that may do better going into dry, correct?
Yes, and that's what we've heard from our clients as well, who have, you know, because when the only supportive housing option is wet housing, but it's not appropriate for those clients come back and say, like, this is not appropriate to meet my needs. I actually am doing worse because of the kind of the nature of this housing is just it feels chaotic and feels unpredictable, and it feels it's very disturbing to the person with brain injury who really doesn't need support around substance use, needs support around that calm, predictive, managing brain injury symptoms piece. So clients have come back and said, look, I know that this is the only option, but it's not good for me.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Ms. Kitan. Now we have members of the public who have signed up to be delegations. Could I please have Jeremiah Myerscough come to the podium, please? Charles. Hey, Charles, come on down. Welcome. If you could just tell us your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship. My name is Charles Marskoff. I currently live at 702 Nickel Street, otherwise known as Samaritan Place. Prior to this, I was a resident of 250 Terminal Ave North, also known as Newcastle Place. As a previously unhoused individual and a former addict, I know better than perhaps anyone else here today how incredibly difficult it is to recover from substance abuse in a wet housing environment. Recovering from drug and alcohol use is difficult enough in a society where we are constantly being bombarded with advertising from the purveyors of alcoholic beverages. For instance, I have had to stop watching sporting events due to the pervasiveness of substance advertising. Drug use has also become prevalent in much of our hit television programming, with series like Breaking Bad and Sons of Anarchy. I moved into Newcastle Place about 1 month into my sobriety, and while I could control my own actions, like not viewing programs, staying out of bars, and taking different routes to avoid passing by liquor stores, I was unable to control the actions of other people. I was constantly triggered by the exposure to drugs and alcohol at Newcastle. When I went outside to smoke a cigarette, there would almost always be at least one person who had been using alcohol that day and would need to come up and converse with me. The smell of alcohol would be the first trigger. Often they would talk about a past glory story of alcohol or drug use, a second trigger. They'd be laughing and having a good time and carrying on. That's a third trigger. And they may have an open can of beer on them. That's a fourth trigger. Another major trigger I faced was the smell of substances being smoked. To a non-drug user, the chemical smell created by the smoking of substances, while an irritant, is undecipherable. However, to a drug user or a former drug user, we can tell exactly what kind of drug is being smoked due to the knowledge of what we have used and what we haven't. For instance, I knew exactly when amphetamines were being smoked because that was one of my drugs of choice. In the hallways of the buildings of Newcastle, one could always smell alcohol, whether it be from people currently drinking, spilling their drinks in the hallway, the empty cans piling up in their rooms, and from the alcohol perspiring through their skin. Well, I could avoid this by staying in my room. I would have to stand in the hallway and line up for meal times, and the smell would permeate into the common rooms where events and other activities would take place. I have been asked time and time again how I managed to stay clean and sober housing, and specifically in Newcastle Place, as what I have accomplished is basically unheard of. I am an outlier to the data. So what I did is I attended counseling groups at the Adult Mental Health Services on Barons Road up to 6 times a week. I volunteered during the federal election. I went to the gym or to the pool a couple of times a week. I literally spent as little time at Newcastle as I possibly could. It was intended to be a home for me and not a place I needed to avoid. There is a serious misconception about the process of recovery amongst much of society. People and many treatment organizations seem to believe that treating the substance use alone will solve the problem. However, in almost every case, there are underlying mental health problems that led to the substance use in the first place. During the period of acute withdrawal, or about the first 3 months, underlying traumas and mental health problems are masked by the effort of acute withdrawal symptoms. It wasn't until I had been clean and sober for about 4 months that counselors at Barons Road started to discuss my ADHD with me. As a person is also most likely, or at one time most likely to relapse just after the acute withdrawal period, and our current system is sending people who've just finished addiction treatment back into a place where substance use is prevalent, we are denying them the opportunity to even begin the process of professional counseling for their underlying mental health conditions.
Mr. Myerscough, you're close to your allotted time here. If you could wrap up, that would be great. Thank you.
And to close, I must humbly thank the City Council and the numerous NGOs in Nanaimo for putting the supports in place that we do have. Otherwise, I would not be here today to advocate. And I would also like to mention the people that have lost along the way, especially a decade or more ago before the city had put these supports in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myerscough. There's a couple of questions for you, so if you could stay there. Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you very much, and congratulations on your sobriety.
Thank you.
Good for you. You said that you went from Newcastle to Samaritan. Is
Yes.
there a difference, and if so, can you explain that?
Yes, there is quite a difference from Newcastle to Samaritan, because Samaritan is actual small apartments for those that are on the 4th and 3rd floor. The 2nd floor is a women's shelter. The 1st floor, I believe, is for very complex cases. I am not positive on that. But having your own apartment instead of a very small room, for lack of a better term, in a bunk-style housing, you have more space, you're able to cook some of your own meals because you have a fridge, you have a couple of stove burners, a microwave, things that you don't have at Newcastle.
Are you exposed to drugs and alcohol the same way you were at Newcastle, at Samaritan?
I have hardly at all seen alcohol use. I've seen the occasional person. There is still some drug use prevalent outside of the building, but not all of that is from those who are residents of Samaritan House.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Manley?
Thank you, and through you, and congratulations on your sobriety. You mentioned that you had ADHD. Do you have other challenges that you needed supports for to be in a supportive housing environment? Like developing life skills or other things or assistance that you needed?
Well, while a life skills program is available, a lot of it wasn't as applicable to me because I had been already attending counseling at Barons Road, which a lot of what's covered in the life skills program is focused on. But I can see for other people that having more of those life skills would be necessary, yes.
And Samaritan is supportive housing. Do you need a lot of support from staff there, or are you fairly independent?
I've been working on becoming more independent as I go along, but there are very few who take that route.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
One more. Councillor Gesselbrock?
Great, thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. That was very compelling, and I just question in terms of your experience in different programs and that. Could you see other individuals that, should they had access to a housing that was more restrictive in terms of the drug use and alcohol use? Did you see individuals relapse as a result of the environment that they were in because of just the proximity to it? And in your opinion, would you have seen people having greater success like yourself should they have had access? And is that a current gap right now?
Yes, there's definitely a current gap in our entire system, which is we do not have any counseling services present at any of our supportive housing. So we have a bit of a life skills program. They do have some spiritual counseling and First Nations cultural counseling, but we don't have any health practitioners that are counselors like what they do up at Barons Road.
Yeah, and just clarity. So for example, say if we need to have a dry supportive housing, it's not, part of it is that any type of drug use is not tolerated. However, what's important is that that supportive housing actually has access to counseling within it that will support people to remain, you know, clean and sober, with or without whether there's people in there that are using or not.
It would definitely be a step. I have seen people that, you know, tried to go sober on their own at Newcastle, and they made it, you know, sometimes 4 weeks, sometimes 6. And then because they lacked some of the counseling which they needed, they would relapse and just go right back.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Myers-Cuff, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brave telling your story. We appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 2 left, and I want to remind everyone, if you want to ask a question at the end of the meeting tonight, I'd like your name on that sign-up sheet over by the double doors. Next, we have Erica Gagnon, Director of Shelters and Guest Services from Nanaimo Family Life Association, and following her, we have Jessica Wilson from the same organization. Welcome, Ms. Gagnon. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name's Erica. Hi. I am the Director of Shelters and Guest Services for Nanaimo Family Life Association. As many of you know, NFLA operates all of our shelters as low barrier, which means that while guests cannot use drugs or alcohol on site, they can and do access shelter services while under the influence. I want to be clear in saying that low barrier services are essential. They save lives, reduce harm, and provide a critical point of connection and a first step for people who are often on the very margins of our communities. But there's a gap that is putting already vulnerable people in crisis and at further risk. That gap is the lack of sober and dry transitional housing and shelter space in our community. Every day in shelters, I see the consequences of having only one type of environment available. When people arrive under the influence, they deserve compassion and safety. But the same when people arrive trying to maintain sobriety, when they are elderly, medically fragile, or actively working on recovery, they deserve the same as well. And right now, I cannot give them that. Not everyone who is going through the crisis of being unhoused is affected by the disease of addiction. Dry housing options could make more spaces in low barrier shelters like ours ready. The number of people who are currently sleeping outside in our community is too many. Low barrier shelters and housing are not designed to support people who are trying to stay sober. Being surrounded by active substance users, withdrawal symptoms, or unpredictable behavior is not just stressful, it's a known contributor to relapse. For seniors, people with mobility issues, those living with chronic illness or cognitive differences, the behavioral volatility that can come with addiction can create a high-risk environment that those people simply don't know how to navigate safely. We are asking people who are making the effort to continue to do so in conditions that would challenge even the strongest among us. Without a sober or dry option, we are forced to place people with very different needs into the same space. It is not trauma-informed, it is not person-centered, and it is not setting anyone up for success. Right now, we are asking one type of housing to meet everybody's need. Nanaimo needs a continuum, like you've heard before. Low barrier shelters are one part of that continuum, but sober and dry spaces are another. Without them, we are leaving people behind. People who are trying, people who are vulnerable, people who want stability but have nowhere appropriate to land. I'm asking that the province recognize this gap and to support the development of sober and dry transitional housing within our community. It's not about creating special housing for some. It's about creating appropriate housing for all. It's about safety and about dignity and the belief that every person deserves a place to stabilize.
Thank you, Ms. Gagnon. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. And a quick question. Thank you for your presentation and for being here. I want you just to explain to me what kind of a case is a low barrier person? What does that mean?
Well, the shelter is low barrier.
Yes, I understand that. I'm sorry, but what would be the criteria that a person is experiencing that would make them eligible for a low barrier?
So anybody can
Anyone.
access our
Okay.
shelters, and they do.
Okay, so it could be a person with active drug addiction, alcoholism, simply homeless,
Yeah.
senior, anything at all. Okay.
Financially unhoused, students, people escaping TV, anyone who needs a shelter, we are the first place they land.
Okay, and why do they use the term low barrier?
Because although there's no substance use allowed on our properties, as long as you can be respectful and follow direction, you can access the space and services if you are under the influence of drugs or alcohol.
Okay, and just one more question. Are they allowed to stay there during the day?
Not in my shelters, no. We are
Just
overnight
night.
shelters, yes.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. It's, through you, thank you for your work, and I've had the privilege of working with you, and I know that you do very good work, so and I appreciate it. It's not an easy gig. I just know from experience working in the shelter system as well that you get a lot of people that show up at the door. They've been evicted for one reason or another, often because the house that they were renting, the apartment they were living in was bought and somebody's moving into it. And they experience a culture shock, really, to go into a shelter system where they're on a cot 2.5 feet away from somebody else in a room with 25 other cots. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to a little bit of how that affects people, and what kind of things you have to do to ensure safety for people that are leaving in the morning, what kind of advice you give them, and how you work with this mixed population.
We work with mixed population a few different ways. NFLA is, I'm very lucky that NFLA has internal case management, and so a big part of her job is navigating risk factors between our guests. But you're right, on any given night, we will have guests who are under the influence. We may have guests that are newly unhoused as senior citizens. We may have international students that have found themselves without housing that attend the university. And navigating that just takes a lot of time and takes a lot of care. It is a huge culture shock for someone who has never been around people that are street entrenched to come to a shelter and now be sleeping 2 feet from somebody who is street entrenched. And so right now, and case management will speak after me, so maybe she can answer questions a bit better, but right now we have low barrier transitional housing. We don't have somewhere that is all others. We don't have somewhere to put somebody if they are not suffering or have suffered from drug addiction or alcohol addiction. You're putting those others sometimes at higher risk, putting them into the current options that we have for referrals for transitional housing.
I know of at least a few cases of people who, when I was working there, who came out of treatment or detox and had nowhere else to go, and came to the shelter, and a number of times people relapse, and I know of at least one person who died because of that. And despite my question to Dr. Walmsley, I was well aware of how people lower their tolerance. I'm just wondering if you're aware of those situations like that, and if there's been any recent ones.
Many, and a big part of our case management is navigating housing for after detox or after treatment. And unfortunately, there's much more demand than there is supply. My personal observations has been that people will go to detox or to treatment. To be clear, they're very different things, and they will be very active They will come out and they will opt to sleep rough or sleep out in the streets to protect their sobriety. So they have a choice in their mind. They feel like coming to low barrier shelters or being housed in a low barrier site would put their sobriety at risk, and often they choose to do that, or they do come back to low barrier environments, and it is very difficult for them to maintain their sobriety in that situation.
That's a miserable choice in our winters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Thank you very much for your presentation and your expertise. We have next up Jessica Wilson, Case Manager from NFLA. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jessica Wilson, and I'm the Case Manager for the Nanaimo Family Life Association, and I support individuals' connection to services that they need to survive and to move forward in their lives. The number one need is housing. Since 2025, our program has successfully placed 74 individuals into supportive or transitional housing. And that was directly through the Coordinated Access and Assessment Table. When the Heart and Hearth programs were introduced, they made a tremendous difference. They helped hundreds of our most vulnerable street and trench community members find a place they could finally call home, free of judgment and grounded in a model that meets people where they're at with their substance use. And this type of housing is essential, and it saves lives. But it's not enough. In the same time frame, we have supported only 9 individuals into subsidized or market housing. I want to be clear, we supported them. We do not have direct referral access to market units. These individuals did most of the work themselves, navigating a system that is already overwhelming for people who are stable, let alone those who are not. Again, in the same time frame, we supported 8 individuals into detox. One of them made it into a treatment program. The other 7 returned to the shelter. And as hard as they tried to stay away from the life of substance use, they failed at maintaining their sobriety. Imagine this, you are living on the streets, fighting every day to survive. You finally reach a point where you've decided that this is not the life you want. You manage to get into detox for 7 to 10 days, but you have entered detox homeless, you're going to exit detox homeless. If you're lucky enough to get a treatment program because of all the stars have aligned, after 3 months of you working very hard, you come out with nowhere dry to go. You return to the shelter, often eating and sleeping with the same friends that you had before who are still entrenched in addiction. You try to stay sober, but after months of searching for dry housing that doesn't exist, you give up and you fall back into addiction. This is not hypothetical, this is what I see every day. We have also seen the landscape of who is unhoused in Nanaimo change dramatically over the past 1 to 3 years. More elderly individuals, many of them experiencing homelessness for the very first time in their lives, are now seeking services within our shelter system. These seniors have never used substances before. Their only barrier is income. They are being forced to choose between paying rent or buying life-saving medication, for keeping the lights on or buying food. Imagine working your entire life doing everything society has asked for you, only to end up homeless with nowhere to go. I've watched people work incredibly hard to better their lives, only to fall back into the cycle of addiction because the supports they need simply do not exist. I've watched people die before they've ever gotten a chance to make it out for good. I've watched seniors, our parents, our grandparents, sit in shelters being forgotten. I've heard shelter guests say, "I'm not messed up enough for housing." I've heard seniors say, "People at my age have been forgotten." These are the individuals who have done everything right. They've got off drugs, they found work, they contributed to society, and still, they remain in shelters because the BC Housing Registry waitlist is years long. In the 5 years I've worked at the Unitarian Shelter, I can count on one hand how many shelter guests were accepted into subsidized housing due to the lengthy wait list to get a unit. Every day I walk into work knowing that more than half of our shelter beds are filled with people who do not fit in the transitional or supportive housing model. and who would be put at a greater risk if they were housed there. To be clear, I'm in full support of supportive and transitional housing. These models are necessary and they are life-saving, but we are ignoring an entire group of individuals who are stuck in limbo, people who are working hard, doing everything asked of them, and still have nowhere appropriate to go. I would like the community to acknowledge these individuals that I spoke of today and prioritize the development of dry and sober transitional housing in our community.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wilson. Councillor Manley.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I know you do a great job.
Thank you.
Having worked with you, and I also have seen your resume, so I know you've been working in the system, assisting people for a long time. And I'm just curious about your experience working in the downtown east side and in other locations. You've seen similar types of problems that you've seen here in Nanaimo.
Yes. Yeah, I worked in the downtown east side for 20 years, and I see a lot of similarities. I do see the supports are, much greater there. There's different type of housing for all levels of, acuity, but yeah, so very similar.
Do you find it more difficult to find placement for people in Nanaimo as opposed to Vancouver?
100%. It is, I've been told I'm pleasantly persistent, so I do my best to get people into housing, but there's limited units. And we've tried and place people in a successful spot so that they're not returning back to us, like just continuing the cycle of homelessness. So once we've filled up those spots and people are, doing well in those units, then now we have none left.
And in the case of people, we see a lot of vulnerable people showing up at the shelter that may have mental health challenges or cognitive disabilities, or seniors who are very open to suggestion, people who are lonely, willing to make friends. Do you see a lot of those folks taken advantage of, and how do you feel about the situation where you're trying to get them somewhere but there's nowhere to put them?
It's incredibly frustrating to walk into the shelter. Like, I've seen an increase in seniors coming to our shelter, and there's literally nowhere to put them. We can't do market housing, it's too expensive. The wait list for BC Housing Registry is years long, and putting them into supportive housing just isn't the right placement. It's gonna put them at a higher risk. They get taken advantage of. Some people develop substance use problems, and there's all these sorts of things, right? Like, so it's pretty frustrating.
So you've seen people become homeless who then become substance users.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Manley. Thank you very much, Ms. Wilson. Appreciate your time here tonight.
Thank you.
That's all the questions we have from council to the panel. If people would, there's a sign-up sheet for questions now. Okay, Bruni, come on up.
Hi, my name is Bruni. So I have a question for the doctor. Are most of the people living on the street addicts?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer. From what I know of the people I treat, I would say over 90% of them are.
You'd say 90% of them?
90% of the people I treat are using substances of some form in a problematic way.
Well, because I find a lot of people on the street, they're just poor and they can't pay the rent. And housing is just a word that's floating around in the wind. And in the meantime, people living on the street, I don't know how you can help them when they're on the street, because they are pushed from place to place every day. You allow this. And these people are as good as any of us are, and they deserve some respect. And on behalf of the people on the street, I am asking that they have a designated campsite with facilities and a cook tent so that they could be humans. And then the social workers can go there and help the ones that need. Because there's more and more people that are living on the street all the time because you cannot afford the rent. And these are good people, and they do not deserve to be pushed around from place to place. And sure, of course, they look dirty and they're smelly. Well, I challenge any of you to go live on the street. Try it for a week and see how good you'll smell.
Thank you, Bruni. We have one question next, Paul Chapman. If folks would like to ask questions and they don't have their name on the sheet, please just come close and we'll try to get through everyone. So, Mr. Chapman, over to you.
Yeah, I wanted to understand what council's going to do with the information they've heard today to bring that point home about the sober housing in Newcastle, but also the, so specifically that one, but also the other sorts of housing that we've heard about. What do you do with this information and the information you already have to take this to the province to make the case for these types of housing? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I can share this has been about an 18-month conversation between City Council and the province. I can further share that our local MLA and the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction is here tonight and supportive of this proposal. There's, I believe, a motion coming that will determine next steps, but I don't want folks to leave tonight thinking this is one moment in time. This is part of a continuum of several years of conversation. Thank you. Please give your name, and you're welcome to ask a question.
Sure. My name is Ted Paul. I'm the Executive Director of Island Crisis Care. We operate a few of the facilities that are being discussed tonight. I'm not here to take a stand either way. I'm in favor of housing, and we can operate under either model. I just wanted to make one clarifying point to something that was said earlier. We do operate 2 recovery dry houses, and so I'd be happy to provide some stats to city staff around sort of the success stories, because we do have a lot that go into market housing from these programs. They are long-term programs, but they do have some benefit, and we'd be happy to share some of that experience.
Thank you, and thank you for introducing yourself. And yep, congratulations on the role. If you could just stay here, I've probably got a couple questions for you. Can you state your name again?
Yeah, Ted, last name's Paul, P-A-H-L.
Thank you, and welcome. Councillor Perino. Oh, pardon me, Councillor Gessbrock beat you to it. Councillor Gessbrock, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for coming up and speaking. I'm just curious of the location of the 2 sober housing.
Yeah, we have 2 programs. One is a male program called David's House, and then we also offer a ladies program called Mary's Place. Both of them are in Nanaimo. I can't give specific addresses.
Yeah.
Oh, are they in Nanaimo or outside?
They're both in Nanaimo.
Okay, great, thanks.
And I think I also wanted to, in my opening remarks, noted that there are dry spaces in Nanaimo. What this council is interested in, dry spaces at scale. Councillor Perino.
Here, and just congratulations on your role. I know you're doing great, and so I'm thrilled that you're here. I'm just wondering how many people are in the dry housing that you have through David's Place and Mary's, and I'm just wondering how long do they generally stay there?
18 to 24 months is sort of the average stay.
Okay.
Both are at capacity, and we have quite long wait lists for them. So this is a partnership that we have with Island Health.
Okay.
And there's 6 rooms in each of the 2 houses.
And it's working?
Very well.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's all the questions we have. Would anyone else from the audience please come on up, introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Wanda LeBlanc. I was a social worker for many, many years, and I'm the parent of an adult child with substance use disorder. He's been in Nanaimo for many years as well, and I volunteer at a shelter in town, and so I've got a pretty good network in terms of supporting him, as well as some family. My son at this time, he's in his 30s. A couple of years ago, he wanted to get off the streets. I told him I would help him do that. We tried to get him into detox, and that wasn't readily available. So I got a hotel room and stayed with him for a week and supported him through withdrawal until we could get him into Clearview. He spent the 10 days to 2 weeks in Clearview, and when he was released, he had no housing. And I fought long and hard to get him into something. He was able to get into a shelter and then was able to get into Newcastle. Of course, he relapsed almost immediately in Newcastle because of the exposure to drugs. So recently my son has tried again, and he has detoxed. He has now spent 6 months in recovery center in Victoria and has been in recovery for that period of time. He will be released at the end of this month, and there is nowhere for him to be released to. He will be able to return to Newcastle. That's his only option. And so, of course, I live with the fear of him relapsing. I think it's a recipe for disaster. He will return to the same people he hung out with, doing the same kinds of things and being exposed to the same drugs. He's one of many, many people this happens to. And I just think it's really important, you know, for us to put a face to these people, and that they, you know, some of them come from, many of them come from good backgrounds, good families, with family supports. It's an incredibly difficult disease to deal with, and they need a lot of support. I advocate for opiate agonist therapy. I think that without it, a lot of people would not be able to live functional lives. So when I hear the word dry housing, I will hope that that will be included as a support. It's, you know, it's always under doctor's care, and it's not street drugs, and it's not high risk. So I just want to put that out there. It's not a question, it's a story, and I hope that we can just really think about these people as vulnerable community members that we should care about.
Thank you so much. I would have allowed a clap there, FYI. That was great. And I also want to note, when I first approached Dr. Walmsley to join us here tonight, he said, Erin, is oat allowed in this vision? And it was a yes that got him to this table. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Anyone else? You can put up your hand if you feel like you might not make it in time. Okay. Thank you all so much for coming. I believe Councillor Armstrong has a motion to deliver.
Yes, I do. It's very similar to one we've done again, but with a little bit of additions. That the mayor write a letter to Minister Boyle requesting the new supportive housing units designated for 250 Terminal be dry supportive units. We've been respectfully requesting this, and to date have been told no. Expert and those in the recovery have told us dry supportive housing greatly helps those on their recovery journey and is a need that is missing in our community. If they relapse, they're in an environment where they can get peer support and medical support to assist them on the road back to their recovery journey. It's very difficult to continue a recovery journey when you're constantly around people that are those actively using. A copy of the link to the June 8th GPC meeting be included so the minister can see the need for this in Nanaimo. And if it's seconded, I'll speak to it.
Seconded by Councillor Perino. I believe we're probably trying to get that on the screen. Okay, Councillor Armstrong, it's been seconded. Do you want to go ahead and?
Yeah, the reason I'm asking for 250 Terminal, because I don't know if we're going to be able to get any more barrier or low or supportive housing units for a while, for the simple fact we know right now the government is trying to be fiscally responsible and move forward. And we think this need, as we've heard tonight from everybody that was on the panel, there is a need, and I believe those 50 units could be filled overnight by recommendations from the people on the panel, as well as those delegates that spoke. So we presently have 9 low barrier housing, and we are missing that one link. And as we've all heard, continuum of care is very, very important. And I would like to see, like, if we are successful in it, that the provider works with the people at the table so that we realize that relapse does happen. People aren't thrown out into the streets because they do relapse, and OAT is an important part of recovery as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Geselbrock?
Thanks. I'm in support of this motion. I think I really appreciate everybody that presented here at the panel, and this was a very useful session. It seems pretty clear to me that we are relying on just one type of supportive housing to meet a wide range of needs for individuals transitioning out of homelessness. And I think this leaves a gap for people who are committed and working on recovery, staying clean and sober, and that would be at greater risk for relapse or increased drug use if they're housed in environments where the substance use is common. I do think that the simplification of wet and dry housing is an oversimplification, but there is a clear need for supportive housing that provides cleaner and sober living with supports for people actively working on maintaining their recovery. So I think expanding these options, and if the only opportunity is at Terminal next, I think that would be a good spot to begin this missing gap in our health and housing continuum. And I think that having this in place, would better support long-term recovery for individuals in our community, and also help, reduce homelessness, which ultimately, this is why this investment from the province is there, is to get people off the streets and reducing the chaos that we are experiencing in our community. And I do think that we need to strategically build out the continuum so that we have clear pathways for individuals to go move out of the streets, get out of addiction, and can come back to the community and contribute. So thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say to the viewing public, this is such a complicated issue. The people that are currently at 250 Terminal are living there and living well. Given their circumstances, they're living well. I was just there last week to look at their therapeutic gardens because we're trying to do something at another place through my Rotary Club. That aside, I was so impressed by the caring, devoted staff to making sure that the residents are safe and on the best path possible. That is very different than what we're looking at through this motion. And I think we need to have it all. We need to have those people who are definitely in need to get them off the street, get them where it's dry and warm, get them the food they need. Then they can consider possible rehabilitation and possibly a road to recovery. But this is different. And the dry supportive housing, that we desperately need for those people who are ready to make that move. And it's just, we've heard it so clearly tonight. So I just wanted to make that difference. I don't want to see the people that are currently in 250 back out in the street. I want them to be safe before we make the transition. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll quote someone whose name I won't use, who's very familiar with this kind of work and managed the facility, and said something to the effect, why in the hell would you expect if you put a truckload of Labatt's 50 next to someone who's trying to recover from alcohol addiction that it's going to be successful? My point in saying that is quite simply this. You have to have facilities, places, supportive housing, a range, a continuum of care that enable people who want to live in a place where they're not living next to someone who's in active addiction. It strikes me as absolutely insane, the concept that you wouldn't have that as part of the continuum of care. If you believe housing is a right, then I think part of that right is a right to live in a place where you can be safe and secure. And if your safety and security means that you need to be and want to be around people who are in a similar position, then surely that should be enabled. So happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you. I'm happy to support the motion as well. I've worked in the shelter system, and I've seen people coming into the shelter system who have been through detox and treatment, and that is the only choice that they have. And that's seriously problematic, and we need to have a continuum of care. We need to have better mental health services, and with your indulgence, I'll just share a personal story, because I had a cousin who had schizophrenia, who was preyed upon in the community that he lived in, had people get him addicted to drugs, move in with him, beat him, get him into criminality, because he was open to suggestion, open to friendship, and suffering from a mental illness. And he was in and out of the criminal justice system for years. And the last time he got out, he died of an opioid poisoning, of an overdose, because he had nowhere to go. He had no supports. There was no mental health supports in the community. There was nothing, for him. They knew in the prison system that he had schizophrenia. They knew he had addiction challenges, and he was a good guy. He was a hard worker. He had a good life before things went sideways for him. And I see my cousin on the street all the time.
Thank you, Councillor Manley. Councillor Eastmere.
I'm really grateful for this conversation. It felt very compassion forward. This is a very complex issue, and I'm really grateful for the perspectives that were shared tonight. The experts who spoke, I really hear an alignment that I feel is sometimes rare, but on this we are really all on the same page. And this isn't the only solution, but it is a really important part of it. So I'm happy to support. I just would like to potentially amend the motion because there's a lot here, and I think really the first sentence is the actual motion, with the addition of the piece about sending the minutes from this GPC meeting to satisfy the request that the minister made for data to support this request, so we can send the data and evidence from this. So that the mayor write a letter to Minister Boyle requesting the new supportive housing units designated for 250 Terminal be dry supportive units, and attach the minutes from the June 8th, 2026 special GPC meeting, and a copy of the video. And that would be the motion. The rest of it is sort of the preamble, to my mind.
Just through the chair, if we could amend that to say the draft minutes, just because the adoptive minutes have to come to a future meeting.
Of course, yes, the draft minutes and video.
Perfect.
Okay, so the amendment has been seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Would anyone like to speak to the amended motion?
I just think there was a lot of extra stuff.
So, okay, I'm going to go to the mayor.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to vote for the amended motion, but candidly, I anticipated that any letter that we would send would outline what happened tonight, that we filled the Shaw Auditorium with a bunch of concerned citizens of various political stripes and interests who are all very concerned about this issue, and I didn't hear one voice here tonight that wasn't supportive, nor did I get any sense from the audience that they weren't supportive of what the inevitable conclusion I would hope would be of this meeting, and that is that this city wants to see dry, supportive housing at 250 Terminal. So anyways, let's vote for the motion.
Okay, Councillor Armstrong, you're on the list. Do you want to speak to the
Oh,
amendment
no,
motion?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to belabor this because I think we're obviously all on the same page, and rightly so. Of course, I'll support this. It just makes so much sense to me that we should be striving for this and advocating for this. And I do want to thank Councillor Armstrong for her lead in the advocacy in this department, in this file. And again, a sincere thank you to our panelists, our experts, and everybody who took the time to come out tonight and show your interest in this extremely important issue to our city. And we know we can't solve the problem ourselves at the municipal level. We need the help of senior government, and I hope that Minister Boyle will listen to the message that we will be sending. Happy to support, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. I am also going to be supporting the amended motion. I would have supported the original. I want to be very clear, Council has unanimously supported this endeavour for close to 2 years now, and I'm very heartened by the fact that our MLA is in the front row and can literally walk across the hall to speak to the minister and take all of the voices that we heard tonight to the minister. So I'm excited about that. I'm going to call the question on the amended motion. All those in favor? Any opposed? I see none opposed. A note of gratitude to everyone who came tonight to share their perspectives and their expertise. Not just our panelists, but the community members, whether you spoke or not. It was really important that you showed up tonight, so thank you. Would someone like to move adjournment?
Chair, sorry, first we just need to vote on the main motion as amended. I'm sorry,
Thank
just
you, Ms.
throw
Curry.
the
That's why
procedural thing at
I
you.
don't typically sit in this seat. I'll call for a question on the main motion as amended. All those in favor? Leonard, are you in favor? Any opposed? I see none opposed. Thank you. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Eastmere. All those in favor? Go.